You are watching a video on the YouTube channel Najao JBU. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the latest content. Stealing 3 million gold coins from the Empire's most notorious villain, then establishing her own powerful guild, Heiser thought she would finally live a peaceful life, with a home to return to and a warm dinner waiting for her. Little did she know, the warm and happy ending before her eyes was merely an illusion controlled by someone else. The music box slowly opened, a melodious tune echoed, and the exquisite figurines spun to the rhythm. This is a story about a miraculous love. Once upon a time, there was a girl who was never allowed to stop. To get high grades and get into her dream school, she could only grit her teeth and constantly run forward. Even when she grew up, those footsteps still could not slow down. To gain experience and earn money for living expenses, she continued to work herself to exhaustion. Rent and countless expenses made her not dare to rest. Yet, people around her kept advising her not to complain, because there were others out there who had it harder. After a long time of squeezing herself dry, she finally collapsed completely and passed away. Ending her past life in despair, in the blink of an eye, she transmigrated to a completely unfamiliar world. However, even in this place, she still could not escape the fate of having to work endlessly. She became Hazel, a character in a novel destined to die from overwork. As long as others were busy falling in love, all the heavy work would be pushed onto her shoulders. Having died of overwork in her previous life, was she really going to die again in this one? To save her own little life, Hazel immediately decided to quit her job. Escaping the future of sudden death, Hazel eagerly imagined a life of freedom and a fresh start. But as beautiful as her dreams were, reality was just as cruel. Opening her wallet, she found not a single penny inside. In this world where one cannot survive without money, there were times when Hazel wondered if she had been too impulsive in leaving her job at the night order. However, she quickly dismissed the thought of going back. She could always find another job, but she only had one life. In her past life, she risked everything only to meet a tragic end. In this life, no matter what, she cannot follow in those same footsteps. Even though her pockets are empty, she is determined to find a way to survive. To survive, she tried all kinds of jobs, from organizing documents to taking contracts to eliminate monsters. As long as she didn't push herself to death once more, she worked hard and saved up to secure her life. However, day after day of serving in restaurants and running around doing odd jobs took its toll. That relentless pace of life, with no time to rest, made her wonder how her current life was any different from her past one. Actually, Hazel's demands have never been high, and she does not long for luxury. She only wants a small home of her own, no longer having to worry about rent and being able to eat her fill every day. She only wishes for a warm family and to live the simplest days. But for an illusionist like her, those beautiful scenes can only appear in illusory magic. No matter how beautiful the illusion is, it is still fake. Just like the little match girl, once the flame goes out, everything will instantly vanish. Meanwhile, in real life, Hazel still has to work as a server in a restaurant to make a living. Looking at the steaming hot dishes, she suddenly thinks how wonderful it would be if a huge sum of money fell from the sky. In fact, Hazel knew many ways to get rich quickly because she still remembered the original plot. However, those opportunities rightfully belonged to others. If an outsider like her casually snatched them away, she might save herself, but she would leave them without enough strength to defeat the Demon King in the future. At that point, the entire world would face the threat of destruction. Hazel had no desire to become the sinner who destroyed the world. In this lifetime, she only wanted to live a peaceful life. Furthermore, exploiting those secret pieces of information required a huge amount of initial capital. In the end, her biggest obstacle remained the lack of money. Just as Hazel felt her dream could never come true, a conversation from the adjacent table caught her attention. Someone mentioned there was an item as tiny as a fingernail, yet worth up to 3 million gold coins. Hearing the figure of 3 million, Hazel instantly snapped awake. The two guests at the next table also mentioned their backer, the most cruel and cold-hearted lord in the empire. Anyone who offended him, even if they fled to the depths of hell, would be dragged back to be dealt with. Hazel immediately remembered this person. He was the villain who did every wicked deed imaginable in the original work, from beginning to end only knowing how to cause trouble for others. A bold idea suddenly flashed in her mind. If she couldn't steal the wealth-making opportunities of good people, then could she steal this villain's money instead? It could teach him a lesson while helping others rid themselves of a menace. Most importantly, she would also get the dream capital she wanted. Hazel knew very well that if she were discovered, she would be hunted down to the depths of hell, and in the end, not even her ashes would remain. But she was not worried at all about being caught. She walked straight to the table of those two subordinates, pretending to strike up a conversation. Before they could react, Hazel cast her illusion, controlling both of them and making them obediently confess the entire truth. After that, she used illusions to alter their memories, making them both believe that the thief was a black-haired woman with wings. Due to this misinformation, countless wanted posters were put up everywhere, but they all targeted the wrong person. Thanks to this, Hazel perfectly escaped the pursuit. With a huge sum of money stolen from the villain, Hazel established her own career, step by step developing it into a powerful mercenary guild. She naturally became the guild leader, getting to leave work on time every day and even having weekends off. It was truly a heavenly life. One day, as Hazel finished clocking out and prepared to go home, Noah was already waiting outside. He gently asked if her work today went well, then kindly reminded her that her favorite dish was ready at home, telling her to hurry back while the food was still hot. Before such a gentle and thoughtful husband, Hazel happily threw herself into his arms. At that moment, she believed that a perfect, happy life had finally arrived. She would no longer have to struggle exhaustedly to survive, but could live forever with the one she loved, just like the ending of a fairy tale. However, the fairy tale ending she imagined was actually just a scene inside the music box in Noah's hand. Looking at the two small figures dancing inside the box, Noah flashed an enigmatic smile. Hazel opened the marriage certificate, unable to believe her eyes. The husband's name written on it was not Noah, but the great villain of the past who had issued a wanted order and hunted her down, the most brutal villain in the entire empire, Killer Hadid. It all started the day Hazel moved to Ferrarium. The day she set foot in Ferrarium, yellow butterflies symbolizing spring appeared everywhere. Breakfast featured her favorite peach bread. Even the fried egg had 2 yolks, making it a rare lucky day. Her mercenary guild not only welcomed its first high-level client, but also happened to have other high-level mercenaries there to help. Thanks to that, the mission was resolved on the spot. Hazel happily saw the guest off, feeling that her luck today was so good that she even thought of buying a lottery ticket. But just as she was about to hang the closed sign, a voice suddenly called out from outside. A person rushed to the front door of the guild, and that was Noah. Panting, he asked, "Am I late?" Hazel quickly replied, "Not late at all." That very first meeting at the guild made Hazel fall in love with Noah at first sight. Not long after, he proposed with a giant bouquet of red roses, touching her so deeply she almost cried. 3 months later, Noah even brought out a diamond almost as big as an eyeball to propose to her. Following the proposal, the two smoothly walked down the aisle. Amidst the blessings, they embraced and kissed, officially becoming legal husband and wife. Hazel thought her life had finally turned a new page. After their marriage, Noah became even more passionate than before. He gently caressed her hand, confessing that as long as he could touch her, all his worries would melt away. Hazel also gently replied that as long as she had Noah by her side, all the anxieties in her heart would also disappear. She used to wonder what it was about Noah that made her so happy. Was it because he always personally went to the kitchen to cook delicious dishes for her? Was it because when the weather was just slightly chilly, he would hastily drape a coat over her shoulders for fear that she would catch a cold? Or because during hot summer days, he would always walk beside her, personally fanning her to keep her cool? Or perhaps it was because every time she woke up startled from a nightmare, Noah would instantly notice and hold her in his arms, gently comforting her. At that very moment, Hazel finally understood the answer. She immersed herself in boundless happiness, only wishing that these beautiful days would last forever. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. Just before their first wedding anniversary, Hazel received the property transfer documents. She planned to give Noah the small villa under construction as an anniversary gift. All procedures were completed just in time, allowing her to surprise him on their special day. Hazel thought her happiness would continue, but as she looked down at the documents, the name written on them made her gasp in shock. The registered husband was not Noah at all, but Killian. He was the most ruthless and cold-hearted villain of the original work. Anyone who offended him would be hunted down to the very end. The capital Hazel had stolen years ago also belonged to this terrifying man. What if, from beginning to end, she was merely a toy in the palm of his hand? Hazel could not believe that truth. Her first reaction was to think that the documents had been written incorrectly. Her illusion from years ago was flawless, absolutely impossible to be exposed. To find out the truth, Hazel turned around and rushed down the stairs. On the lower floor, Nigella was about to report on the business situation of the Mercenary Guild and remind her of the afternoon appointment with Noah. But Hazel was in no state of mind to listen. She made an excuse of forgetting something at home and hurriedly ran off. At this moment, she had only one thought in her mind. She had to get home as quickly as possible and ask Noah what on earth was going on. Hazel ran straight back home, immediately opening the secret drawer in Noah's desk. She desperately wanted to prove that everything was just a misunderstanding. At the same time, Noah had just arrived at the guild. Hearing from Nigella that Hazel had rushed back home, he immediately changed direction to pursue her. The moment she pulled the secret drawer open, Hazel froze at the sight inside. It was filled with confidential files about her. From her daily schedule to her ideal type, everything was recorded with frightening clarity. It turned out that from the very beginning, Noah had approached her with his own motives. Just as Hazel was panicking, the sound of Noah's returning footsteps suddenly came from outside. The sound in the hallway grew closer and closer, causing her to hurriedly retreat toward the door. Right after that, there was a knock on the door, and it slowly opened. Noah smiled as he walked into the room and saw Hazel standing frozen. He gently pulled her into his arms, asking in confusion, "Why are you shaking so much? It's midsummer, yet your body is so cold?" Seeing Noah still as gentle as always, Hazel's heart was completely consumed by fear, her chest pounding with anxiety. She was still worried that he would discover she had been rummaging through the drawer. But before she could say anything, Noah spoke up first with concern. "You aren't coming down with a cold, are you?" He quickly reached out to check her temperature. He added that catching a flu in the summer was the most miserable thing. If she had a fever, they should cancel today's appointment. Seeing that Noah did not suspect anything at all, Heiser hastily explained, "I don't have a cold, it's just that the knock on the door startled me just now." Only then did Noah breathe a sigh of relief, smilingly promising to knock more gently next time. He held her tightly in his arms, saying that he would definitely make it up to her during today's date. Lying in Noah's gentle embrace, the doubts in Hazel's heart did not dissipate at all. It was hard to associate the attentive husband in front of her with the brutal archvillain killer Hadid. Afterward, the two of them boarded the carriage for their scheduled date. Looking at the itinerary that Noah had meticulously prepared, Hazel smiled and praised her husband on the outside, but internally, she constantly reminded herself to stay calm. The specific records in the secret files were enough for her to confirm the truth. In the novel she had transmigrated into, Killer Hadid was a demon with extremely cruel methods. If anyone displeased him, they would pay with their life. In this world, merely hearing his name was enough to strike terror into people's hearts. Yet at this moment, that terrifying archvillain flashed a gentle smile. He personally held the freshly made dessert, carefully feeding it piece by piece to Hazel's lips. The more she thought about it, the less she understood. Years ago, she ran off with a massive fortune of his, yet now she was neither physically harmed nor killed. On the contrary, he had been playing the role of a doting husband for a whole year. Just this morning, Noah carefully picked out her clothes, dried, and brushed her hair. Could all of this be a facade, just to kill her when she least expected it and felt most desperate? Seeing Hazel remain silent for a long time, Noah asked worriedly, "Is the breakfast not to your liking?" Hazel startled, quickly covering up her thoughts. "No, I'm just savoring it slowly." Only then did Noah feel relieved, smiling as he handed the entire basket of pastries to her. Hazel chewed on the delicious cake, feeling his meticulous care. However, every time that inescapable doubt crossed her mind, her emotions wavered between infatuation and terror. Wanting to break the strange atmosphere, Heiser proactively asked, "Do you want to try a bite?" Noah just smiled and sat opposite her. He reached out to wipe the cake crumbs off the corner of her lips, then placed his fingertip into his mouth and softly said, "This is enough." That ambiguous and intimate gesture left Heiser stunned. Her heart, which had just barely calmed down, instantly began to race, leaving her completely flustered and unsure of how to face Noah. To hide her nervousness, Heiser walked along while trying to talk about the guild's work. Without thinking, she casually mentioned inviting a familiar mercenary from the guild to have a meal. Hearing that she planned to invite another man to dinner, Noah's expression instantly turned cold. "Are you planning to go alone with him?" Noah kept smiling as he leaned close to her, his voice terrifyingly gentle. "My dear, that's not a good idea. I believe you will think of a wiser way." Under that terrible pressure, Hazel suddenly realized that whenever he was unhappy or jealous, Noah would switch to calling her my dear. Behind that sweet address, a murderous aura was clearly hidden. Hazel's survival instinct flared up instantly, and she quickly changed her words. She said she would arrange for another staff member to welcome him and increase the bounty for that mercenary. Hearing the satisfactory answer, Noah immediately restored his usual bright smile. "I knew you could do it." Though she had temporarily escaped danger, Hazel only wanted to collapse. If she was threatened by him a few more times, she feared her lifespan would be significantly reduced. In front of the bulletin board on the street, the crowd gathered and discussed animatedly, as the number of demonic beasts in the north and west was rising sharply. Ferrarium is located in the south, so it is temporarily unaffected, but Hazel understands very well what that means. The constant unusual behavior of the demonic beasts is a sign that the seal of the Demon King is about to be broken. On the day he is resurrected, the threat of world destruction will surely come. At first, Hazel was hesitant about whether she should stop the Demon King. But she quickly remembered that she was just a supporting character destined to die early from overwork in the original novel. Even if she did not participate, the male and female leads could still save the world and live happily. Therefore, instead of worrying about the greater good, she should worry about her own life first. Especially since the person standing right next to her is the brutal archvillain of the original work. Hazel secretly worried. Killer could easily overpower both the male and female leads, and was almost immune to illusion and magic. She knew she was absolutely no match for him. But thinking about it carefully, this was also a great opportunity to test him. She just needed to secretly cast a weak illusion spell on Noah. If he was a normal person, he would immediately fall into the illusion. But if he was truly killer, the magic would have absolutely no effect. What if someone had intentionally hidden the profile in the secret compartment to drive a wedge between them? Furthermore, the appearances of Noah and Killer were starkly different. According to rumors, Killer had gloomy, lusterless black hair and eyes as red as syrup. Meanwhile, Noah's eye color was as elegant as rubies. No matter how she looked at it, they couldn't possibly be the same person. Heiser believed more and more that this was just a misunderstanding. Even so, to be completely at ease, she still decided to try it once when night fell. While bathing and changing, Heiser silently made up her mind. It was true that illusions would infiltrate other people's minds, but as long as she had no intention of attacking, the impact would be almost negligible. Even a child wouldn't notice it. Once prepared, Heiser walked down the corridor alone and gently pushed open the room door. Even though it was just a small test, she still had to control her power with absolute precision. She absolutely could not let the one she loved suffer any harm. Noah was leaning on the bed, gently greeting her. Heiser silently prayed that he would fall into her illusion. Carrying her final hope, she officially cast her magic. The casting method Hazel uses most often is eye contact. Although using it too frequently over a long period can cause her eye color to change, this is still the method with the highest success rate, highly suitable for the urgent situation at hand. Magic power quickly gathered in her eyes as Hazel took step after step toward Noah. Vibrant flower vines and glittering light instantly filled the room, a sight that, under normal circumstances, no one could possibly miss. However, Noah, who was leaning on the bed, had no reaction at all. He even smiled and asked, "Why are you just standing there instead of coming over here?" Seeing that Noah did not notice anything unusual, Hazel's entire body froze. The person in front of her turned out to be completely immune to illusions. Unable to believe the truth, Hazel tried to find a reason to comfort herself. Perhaps Noah was just dazed with fear, or her magic just now was too weak. Clinging to her last shred of hope, she once again surged her mana, pushing her illusion to its absolute limit. Magnificent floral vines even wrapped directly around Noah. Yet, he stood there with a smile, completely indifferent to the world-shaking phenomenon. The hope in Hazel's heart was utterly shattered by reality. Suddenly, Noah stopped his movements and turned his head to look around the magic-infused room. Seeing him finally react, her suspended heart instantly settled. She thought he had noticed something unusual, proving he wasn't that arch-villain who was completely immune to magic. But Noah pulled her into his arms instead, smiling as he asked, "Since when did you learn how to make someone's heart flutter like this?" Hazel was stunned. Even though the illusion had enveloped them both, Noah acted as if it did not exist at all. She blurted out, "Can you really not see anything?" Noah smiled and took her hand, gently replying, "I can see my wife very clearly." That affectionate answer shattered Hazel's last ray of hope. No matter how powerful the illusion she used, the man before her remained completely immune. This meant the true identity of her partner was absolutely not simple. Facing Noah's caring inquiry, Hazel panicked, made an excuse that she had urgent work to handle, and turned to run away. She slammed the door, escaped outside, and slid down the wall to sit on the floor. At this point, Hazel could no longer deceive herself. That person was not the gentle and caring Noah at all, but rather the ruthless villain killer. From the moment she saw the file in the secret compartment, the evidence was laid bare before her eyes, yet she still tried to deny the truth. Thinking about how the deep affection over the past year was all just an act, and how her husband, who was waiting to take her life, could play the role so perfectly without a single slip-up, she could only bow her head and smile bitterly now. It was all cruel to the extreme. It was true that years ago, she had touched the devil's money and triggered his revenge. But if he wanted to, he could have just killed her swiftly. Why bother pretending to be a deeply devoted, patient husband for a whole year? Facing a great villain with such a terrifying obsession, even if she knelt down and begged now, he would absolutely not spare her life. Having just escaped the fate of dying from overwork, she could not turn around and die a miserable death at the hands of this devil. It seemed the only choice left now was to run away completely. But escaping was no easy feat, as Killer knew everything about her. If she acted hastily, she would quickly be captured. Not to mention, forging a new identity and preparing an escape route required a lot of money. Without money, even if she escaped, she would only starve to death. Before Hazel could think of a way, a knock sounded at the door. She startled, curling up next to the door, not daring to make a sound. Noah's gentle voice echoed in, "I don't want to disturb your work. I'm just worried you'll be hungry working late, so I left some food outside. Don't push yourself too hard." Hearing his footsteps fade away, Hazel leaned against the door, breaking into a cold sweat. The devil who could kill her at any moment was still caring for her every little detail. Once she was sure there was no more sound outside, Hazel cautiously opened the door. On the hallway floor sat a sumptuous, freshly cooked tray of food, still steaming. 1. She picked up the tray, the situation feeling more and more absurd the more she thought about it. Did that cold-blooded archvillain plan to mimic the witch from Hansel and Gretel, fattening her up before eating her? 2. What kind of villain in this world likes to play physical and mental games with others like this? Even if he wasn't playing tricks, she had already been tormented enough to feel completely exhausted. 3. As Hazel ate the food that perfectly suited her taste, she couldn't stop the inner conflict tearing her apart. 4. She knew very well that, beyond all practical worries, the most important reason she couldn't bear to leave was that she had fallen too deeply in love with Noah. Facing the partner she once believed would walk with her until the end of her life, who could truly just pack up and leave in an instant. 5. Others might be able to decisively sever their feelings, but Hazel could not. This was only the first night since their marriage that the two of them did not sleep side by side, yet her heart was already filled with a sense of emptiness and loneliness. The night bell quietly rang out. Feeling it was late enough, Heiser assumed Noah must have fallen asleep and intended to return to her room, only to be startled by the sight before her the moment she opened the door. Noah was still standing quietly by the window. Seeing her step out, he calmly greeted her and slowly turned around, asking with a smile, "Is all the work you needed to handle finished yet?" Heiser asked back in surprise, "It is almost morning, why have you not rested yet?" Noah only looked at her gently. "Without you by my side, I cannot sleep." Saying that, he pulled her into his arms. Lying in that embrace, Hazel suddenly felt he was no different from a clingy big dog. But she immediately snapped out of it, constantly reminding herself that the man in front of her was the demon waiting to take her life. Before she could step back, Noah smiled and interrupted her thoughts. He picked her up, intending to carry her back to the room to catch up on sleep. Being carried by him all the way to the room, Hazel couldn't help but recall the previous nights they had clung to each other until morning. She began to worry she wouldn't have any energy for work the next day. Seeing through her thoughts, Noah leaned in close and teased, "I have absolutely no intention of doing that today." Looking at the man in front of her playing mischievous tricks, Heiser secretly grumbled in her heart. Who would have thought that the demon who terrified everyone would enjoy playing such childish games? Returning to bed, Heiser constantly reminded herself to stay calm and absolutely not reveal any weakness before Killer. To act natural, she went along with the story and asked back, "What if I tricked you?" As soon as those words were uttered, Noah suddenly leaned down, completely enveloping her. Facing Noah, who was looking down at her from above, Heiser panicked. She had only reluctantly accepted the fact that Noah was Killer, completely unsure of how to handle this situation. Seeing her close her eyes to avoid him, Noah took the initiative to speak in a gentle voice. "As long as you don't want to, I will stop immediately. I absolutely do not want the wife I love to suffer." Hearing that confession, Hazel was at a loss for words. But she knew very well that once she knew the truth yet still stayed by his side like before, all the sweetness from the past would be completely engulfed by bitterness. Noah gently teased her, playing along with her anxiety. "Sometimes tasting a little bitterness is good for your health. What's so bad about staying by my side?" Hazel frantically warned herself to stay clear-headed, unable to let herself be further enchanted by the tenderness before her eyes. She knew she had to reject him decisively. But when she couldn't help calling Noah's name, he immediately held her hand tightly. He gently asked her what she truly wanted him to do. Facing those eyes full of affection, Hazel's heart rate was completely thrown into disarray. Clearly, just by speaking up to stop him, she could protect herself from further pain, yet she realized she couldn't bring herself to push him away. The feelings she had been immersed in for the past year had turned into a bottomless ocean, drowning her completely with no way out. Even knowing that continuing to submerge herself would soon suffocate her, Hazel still decided to pour out all the pent-up feelings in her heart, holding nothing back. Faced with Noah's gentle response, she actively embraced him and gave him a deep kiss. Hazel tried to find the last remaining warmth, wanting to spend all her love in just one single moment. She secretly reminded herself that as long as there was not even a shred of lingering attachment left, she would find it easier to let go. By the day the truth tore everything apart, the fear and pain of betrayal would surely overwhelm this desperate love. Only by completely severing those feelings would she be ruthless enough to retreat, escaping from Killer who posed as her husband and could take her life at any moment. The next morning, Noah woke up in a cheerful mood. He carefully prepared breakfast for the two of them. Heiser had just woken up, looking at her husband who was still caring for her attentively, and instinctively muttered, "You big liar." Noah took the opportunity to lean in close, smiling gently, "Yes, I am indeed the biggest liar in the world." Heiser angrily declared, "I will absolutely never forgive you." Noah didn't get angry at all, only calmly advising, "Let's have breakfast first. If you want to be angry, you need a full stomach to have the strength." Heiser thought about it and found his words reasonable. Getting angry indeed required physical strength, so she sat down at the dining table. Holding her butter knife, Heiser secretly made up her mind. She absolutely could not continue to be toyed with by the man in front of her. She would secretly prepare a perfect divorce. The two of them sat opposite each other like that, quietly eating breakfast. Looking at Heiser across the table, Noah couldn't help but smile. Walking on the crowded street, Heiser looked at the guild building in front of her, her heart filled with nostalgia. She had never thought she would actually have to abandon everything to run away. This guild had an irreplaceable meaning to her. Years ago, wanting to escape the fate of dying from overwork in the Night Order, Heiser, who was penniless at the time, risked her life to intercept killers' money. It started as just a simple small room with a single mercenary. After that, like the town musicians of Bremen, she gathered companions one by one, step by step building up today's scale. Heiser looked at the guild building she built with her own hands, smiling back at everyone's greetings. No matter how reluctant she was, she still decided to leave the guild to Killer. This was both a thank you for his care over the past year, and her way of repaying the money she took years ago. She only hoped to get a way to survive in return. Heiser planned to bring only assets that could be converted into cash and secretly prepared to flee. Right at that moment, Nigella rushed in a panic and urgently reported. A giant demonic beast had appeared in the west of the town. She hurriedly added that the suddenly appeared beast was destroying everything at a terrifying speed. Heiser immediately stopped in her tracks, her mind in turmoil. Ferrarium was originally a city that had never had demonic beasts, and the entire city had absolutely no defensive structures. If even this place was no longer safe, it meant the threat had already arrived before their eyes. Faced with the sudden crisis, Heiser decided to prioritize stopping the demonic beast. She decisively tied her hair back, ordering Nigella to immediately gather the combat mercenaries scattered all over the place. Nigella hurriedly tried to stop her out of fear that she would be in danger, and even more worried that Noah would be anxious because of this. Hazel only turned her head and smiled. If you are worried, then quickly bring everyone here. Having said that, she did not look back but rushed straight to the front lines. Arriving at the scene, Hazel hid behind a wall to observe. The giant demon beast before her eyes had a massive body, and moreover, it possessed red eyes identical to Noah's, making her extremely uncomfortable. Fortunately, on its forehead, there was no dangerous protection stone. That could be considered a stroke of luck amidst misfortune. Hazel decided to deal with it quickly before the others arrived. She drew her sword, decisively rushed out, and loudly drew the attention of the demon beast. Being provoked, the monster opened its blood-red mouth and roared, shaking her to the point that her ears went numb. Immediately after, it swung its heavy claws, closing in on her. Right when the magic beast lunged, Heiser quickly widened the distance, luring it into the trap. Immediately after, she deployed a wide-range illusion. Unlike the single-target illusion used to test Noah, this large-scale illusion could deceive all targets within range. It turned non-existent, painful thorn bushes into real physical damage. Deceived by its own brain, the magic beast believed its body was tightly bound by thorny vines. The thorns immediately tore through its flesh, forcing it to stand in place and roar in agony. Seeing that the monster was suppressed, Heiser used her momentum to leap high into the air. She rushed straight toward it and swung her sword down. At that moment, Nigella arrived leading a large group of mercenaries. But before they could charge in to support, the giant magic beast collapsed to the ground with an earth-shaking thud. Hazel sheathed her sword and let out a soft sigh of relief. The mercenaries who had just arrived and witnessed the scene with their own eyes were all stunned by the guildmaster's strength in ending the battle single-handedly, then cheered in unison. Amidst the countless praises, Hazel could only smile wryly, feeling that everyone was exaggerating. She dared to use illusion publicly because back when she was in the Night Order, she was used to hearing arrogant mockery suggesting that such tricks were of no account. Furthermore, if she were truly that strong, she wouldn't have had to run away years ago due to being on the verge of death from overwork. Everyone was only making a fuss because they had never seen a monster in this peaceful town before. But the most troublesome thing right now wasn't those compliments, but rather Noah after hearing the news. He chuckled softly, asking in a voice that sent shivers down one's spine. How dare you leave your subordinates behind to fight the magic beasts alone? Heiser immediately realized that the man in front of her was truly angry. Noah reproached her for being too reckless by facing the magic beasts all by herself. The two had once promised never to put themselves in danger. But who was the one who proposed that promise first? Only now did Heiser remember that, indeed, she was the one who had made that request. Memories of the past came rushing back. At that time, she was startled to discover syrup on Noah's sleeve, thinking he had been in a fight or had run into magic beasts. Noah, however, casually replied that the area was very safe. The stain on his sleeve was just sauce accidentally splattered while cooking. At that time, Hazel was not on guard at all, so she believed him immediately. Feeling relieved because she wanted Noah to stay away from danger, she also insisted on making him promise never to put himself in harm's way. Noah immediately agreed as well. Thinking back now, Hazel suddenly realized the truth. The substance on his sleeve back then was definitely not sauce. Yet Killer, the one who could take her life at any moment, was now using that very promise to lecture her, blaming her for making him worry by facing the magic beast alone. Hazel grumbled frantically in her mind, if she died at the hands of the magic beast, wouldn't that save him some trouble? Or did he absolutely have to kill her with his own hands to be satisfied? However, to avoid exposing her escape plan, Hazel could only endure it. She obediently admitted her mistake and tried her best to act cute, begging Noah for forgiveness. Noah helplessly instructed, if something like this happens again, no matter what, you must keep our promise. Hazel quickly and obediently agreed, then left in the carriage. She sighed softly, thinking that surviving by this man's side was truly not easy at all. As night fell, a subordinate respectfully reported to Killer that all preparations were complete, asking for instructions on whether to depart tomorrow as planned. Killer coldly confirmed, adding that Hazel did not seem to have noticed anything yet. Therefore, the plan must not have even a single minor mistake. The subordinate advised Killer not to worry, as everything had been prepared for this moment for a very long time. However, he remained vigilant, until the very last moment, I will not let my guard down. The conversation ended, and Noah pushed open the door to return to the bedroom. Looking at Hazel sleeping peacefully on the bed, he stood coldly by the bedside for a long time. Reaching out to turn off the bedside lamp, darkness immediately enveloped the room. He slowly stroked her profile, his deep gaze lingering on his sleeping wife. Hazel suddenly woke up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath. She touched her neck, wondering if her nerves had been too tense lately, causing her to dream of Noah choking her. Before she could recover from the nightmare, Noah's voice sounded beside her. Why did you wake up so suddenly? Did you have another nightmare? He gently pulled her into his arms. Hazel leaned against his chest, softly saying, You came home so late tonight? Noah kissed her forehead, gently apologizing and promising to try to come home earlier in the future. He gently stroked Hazel's hair, reminding her that it was still early and she could sleep a bit longer. Then, he casually asked, You didn't forget we have to go out together this morning, right? Hearing this, Hazel quickly sat up, trying to negotiate. Could we do it another day? Lately, there has been so much work, I want to rest today. But Noah, who always indulged her every request, unusually fell silent. Seeing that hesitation, Hazel immediately had a bad feeling. Based on his past personality, he would have definitely agreed happily. At this moment, she suddenly realized today was indeed the weekend just before their wedding anniversary. Could this be the day Noah intended to take action against her? Believing that he wanted to take this opportunity to kill her, Hazel decided that no matter what, she could not leave the house today. Her survival instinct immediately kicked in, causing her to cough violently and pretend to be sick. To her surprise, Noah went along with it and suggested, Then you should rest well today, and we will go tomorrow. Only then did Hazel remember that the weekend had 2 full days. She had no choice but to grit her teeth and agree, while frantically trying to think of an excuse for tomorrow. Outside, heavy rain had begun to pour at some point. Noah stood alone by the window, quietly watching the rain all night long. Seeing that the rain was too heavy, he took the initiative to say, The rain makes it impossible for carriages to travel. Tomorrow's plan to go out will have to be cancelled. On the outside, Hazel appeared extremely regretful, but in her heart, she was cheering wildly, Indeed, even heaven is helping me. Noah smiled comfortingly, It's all right, we still have plenty of time in the future. Hearing those suggestive words, Hazel was both astonished and suspicious, unable to guess what terrifying revenge he had prepared. While sipping the hot soup Noah had specially cooked for her, she casually pried, Where did you originally plan to take me this weekend? Noah smiled, stepped forward, and gently held her hand. You must see that place for yourself, it is still a secret for now. Hearing him say he would take her to a place she had never been to, Hazel shivered inwardly, suspecting he was hinting at sending her straight to the afterlife. The heavy rain had only helped her escape this once, and next time there was no guarantee he would not change to another method unaffected by the weather. Hazel understood she had to quickly prepare for a divorce and run away, or even find a place for shelter. To do that, first she needed a reliable helper. Just as Hazel was calculating, Noah suddenly called her name softly. He complained that she had been distracted lately, and her eyes were no longer on him. He leaned close to her, his voice sounding a bit aggrieved. In my heart, there is only you. Hazel hurriedly explained, firmly stating that she was still looking at him. Noah immediately drew closer, his voice deepening. You are not allowed to look elsewhere, nor think of anyone else. In your eyes, there can only be me. He squeezed her hand tightly and added, at least when we are together, you can only look at me. Hazel caught the underlying warning. He clearly meant she could never escape his control. Killer had also noticed something unusual in recent days. Hazel's behavior was extremely strange. She was constantly startled, and her gaze, which used to always linger on him, now continuously sought opportunities to look elsewhere. However, reports from his subordinates showed nothing suspicious, which made Killer wonder what on earth was going on with her. He even suspected that another man might have appeared. But on second thought, anyone capable of ruining his plans had long been cleared away by him. Just then, Killer remembered that their wedding anniversary was approaching. Given Hazel's nature of valuing rituals, she was certainly preparing a secret surprise this time. If so, he would just cooperate by pretending not to know, continuing to play the role of a perfect husband. Killer pulled out a drawer, taking out a file titled Heiser's Ideal Type. As long as he strictly followed what was written inside, he would never go off track. Years ago, his subordinate had handed him an investigation report on Heiser and began presenting the basic information. Heiser, 23 years old, was living alone in the capital. Flipping to the attached portrait, the subordinate looked at the small and beautiful girl in the painting. He secretly compared her to a white rabbit in the snow, or a timid deer. Seeing Killer's lack of reaction, he quickly pulled back his thoughts. He reported that Heiser did not have any backing from family forces, so dealing with her would not be difficult. But as he read further, the subordinate realized the situation was not that simple. The file also recorded several extremely difficult points to resolve. Hazel graduated at the top of her class and joined the Night Order. She not only completed over 100 subjugation missions but was also the only person with a record of serving in 2 major Night Orders. In particular, her record of using illusions remains flawless to this day. Reading up to this point, Killer finally understood why the subordinates sent previously had all been utterly defeated. What puzzled him was that Hazel had gone to great lengths to cut off his funding, yet she brazenly used illusions to establish a mercenary guild and build a reputation. If she hadn't done so, finding her whereabouts would have been much more difficult. The subordinate continued to report that Hazel came from a commoner background, so she was often looked down upon in the past. Despite her illustrious military exploits, she never thought of herself as any special. Knowing this psychological weakness, Killer smiled calculatedly. For someone who yearned for attention and recognition like her, just a little guidance could make her fall completely under his control. He placed his hand on the report about her ideal type, ordering his subordinates to immediately present every detail. He would personally approach Hazel based on those standards and make her fall completely into his hands. Years ago, it was thanks to that meticulously designed plan that Killer step by step came to Hazel's side. He reached out to wind up the music box, watching the 2 small figures hugging and spinning around. Thinking back, to completely deceive Hazel, he had indeed spent a lot of effort. The report stated that her ideal type must be tall, handsome, with shoulders as broad as the Pacific Ocean. Even though he did not understand what the Pacific Ocean meant, Killer remained extremely confident in his appearance. With his face already meeting the standard, he only needed to change into light-colored clothes, hold some flowers, and walk up to Hazel with a smile to easily receive a compliment. The subordinate continued reading, discovering that the other party also had to be good at cooking and definitely make time for a date once a week. He began to doubt whether a cold person like his master could meet such requirements. Killer had never even stepped into a kitchen, so how could he know how to cook? But Killer simply replied indifferently, "I will know after trying once or twice." To match the ideal type, he actually wore an apron and practiced by himself. Before long, Killer possessed excellent cooking skills, and the dishes he prepared always made Hazel praise him endlessly. However, the further the subordinate read, the more bizarre the requirements and the report became. During the day, the other party had to be gentle and thoughtful, but at night, they had to be as fierce as a wild beast with an intense desire for possession. Killer listened but could not understand why anyone would like that kind of control. He even suspected that Heiser's ideal type suffered from split personality. But in order to completely conquer her, he could only reluctantly comply with everything. After all the subordinates sent had lost at Heiser's hands, so this matter could only be handled by him personally. At that time, Killer approached her himself because he wanted to know how Heiser had stolen the information and how many secrets she still held in her hands. Unwittingly, Heiser had been in his hands for a whole year. Although Killer still had not found the path of the information leak, the woman who stole information in front of him had long been infatuated with him to the point of losing all reason, completely under his control. Even Killer did not expect that he would be immersed in this game for a whole year. In his eyes, Hazel was sometimes as clumsy as a little white rabbit hopping around, even somewhat adorable. Killer immediately denied that thought, believing he only found her cute and could absolutely not fall in love. It was time to end the play. But halfway there, he suddenly stopped in his tracks. Hazel usually ate very little, looking regretful whenever she couldn't finish her food. Especially with pumpkin pie, she could eat 2 slices in a row. Wanting Hazel to enjoy her meal, Killer without a second thought put on an apron and went into the kitchen. He not only made the cake but also specially prepared a lot of her favorite whipped cream. Carrying the freshly baked cake, Killer still didn't forget to find an excuse for himself. He asserted that all of this was nothing more than a part of the plan. Meanwhile, Hazel sat alone in her study writing a letter. For her escape plan to succeed, she had to quickly find a reliable helper. She wrote the name Dylan Banker on the paper, but having just finished the greeting, she hit a dead end, not knowing how to proceed. Hazel had to take advantage of Noah's absence to contact her helper. But suddenly reaching out to someone she hadn't contacted in a long time made her feel awkward no matter how she thought about it. Among everyone she knew, the most reliable person was her former colleague Dylan from the Night Order. Actually, the two of them hadn't worked together for very long. To be precise, Dylan was only a colleague of the original Hazel, not her real close friend after transmigrating. In Hazel's memory, Dylan was an extremely open-minded person, always ready to help anyone. Whenever someone nearby faced difficulties, he would be the first to step forward. Years ago, when Hazel faced obstacles in leaving the Night Order, it was Dylan who took the initiative to help her resolve it. Conversely, when facing trouble, he did not hesitate to run to Hazel for support. Although they had not collaborated for long, they could be considered to have a good rapport. Thinking of this, Hazel couldn't help but smile, suddenly feeling a bit nostalgic about the days they used to fight side by side. In the letter, Hazel explained her current situation and hoped Dylan would send a trustworthy person. She added some gold coins as payment and sealed the letter carefully with a fire seal. Having finished writing, Hazel breathed a sigh of relief. If sent through the regular post office, she feared Noah would quickly discover it, so she had to use a more discreet method. Hazel raised her hand, concentrating the magic within her body to summon a magical messenger pigeon. Although its speed could not match a communication crystal, it was absolutely impossible to intercept or track. She quickly handed the letter to the bird to carry away. The magical bird soared through the clouds, flying straight to the training ground of the Night Order. At that moment, Dylan was focusing on his sword practice when the bird landed on his shoulder. He was quite surprised that someone was using a messenger bird powered by their own unique magic to contact him. As soon as he opened the letter to read, Dylan's face instantly lit up upon realizing the sender was Hazel. He quickly wrote a reply, teasing that she never usually contacted him and only remembered him when in trouble. However, for the sake of their long-standing friendship, he still happily agreed to help. In the letter, Dylan explained that he was tied up with official duties and could not come in person, but he would immediately arrange for a trustworthy person to assist Heiser. He also lamented that recently, even the suburbs of the royal capital were frequently harassed by magical beasts, forcing him to work overtime and night shifts every day. Reading this, Heiser was startled. The time of the magical beast's rampage had arrived sooner than she had anticipated. Dylan also mentioned that the investigation results showed the beast's recent behavior was extremely unusual, as if they were frantically searching for something. A bad premonition immediately arose in Heiser's heart, but she quickly shook her head, stopping herself from overthinking. After all, someone else would handle those troubles. For her right now, the most important thing was still to do everything in her power to save her own life. Heiser casually threw Dylan's letter into the fireplace to burn it, secretly resolving to thank him properly the next time they met. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. Nigella stepped in to remind her that a new employee was coming for an interview today. Hazel quickly told her to let the person in. But hearing about the interview for a new employee immediately made her alert. Most guild members, including Nigella, were actually arranged by Noah. Previously, she had praised them for working efficiently, but thinking back, she realized they were all eyes and ears monitoring her. To avoid raising suspicion, Hazel decided to look at the resume first and go with the flow. Shortly after, the new employee slowly walked into the room. As soon as she saw who it was, Hazel was instantly shocked. The person who pushed the door open and entered was Ginger. He cheerfully introduced himself, saying he would stay and work at the guild from now on. Hazel was completely stunned. She had never expected that the helper sent by Dylan would actually be Ginger. In the original novel, Ginger was originally a subordinate of the villain faction. To save her imprisoned lover, she abandoned the darkness for the light and joined the protagonist's faction. A character with such a tragic past usually cannot escape the fate of sacrifice according to the original plot. According to the storyline, Ginger should still be at the arena in the royal capital at this time, working under the villain. Heiser thought to herself, could it be that because of her intervention, the situation had begun to deviate from the original? However, Ginger is not only skilled in swordsmanship but also knowledgeable in herbs, capable of handling various tasks with extremely stable performance. Thinking about how Ginger would change sides in the future anyway, Heiser decided to take this opportunity to win her over. She immediately invited Ginger to start working today. At the same time, she also intended to help change Ginger's fate, saving her from a tragic end. Zinger happily accepted. As long as the guildmaster speaks, I am willing to do any mission. First, Heiser arranged for Zinger to shadow Nigella to get used to the work. However, she knew very well that if she wanted Zinger's help to escape, they had to avoid Nigella's supervision. Returning to the bedroom, Heiser lay flat on the bed, reviewing a high stack of documents. Noah walked in, looking somewhat displeased to see her busy working even in her resting area, and leaned in to ask. Heiser explained, I am just checking some minor matters. Once Zinger finishes training, my workload will decrease significantly. Hearing this, Noah sat down on the edge of the bed and gently massaged her shoulders. Hazel secretly warned herself absolutely not to fall for that fake tenderness. However, she could not escape yet, so she had to let him do whatever he wanted. Unexpectedly, Noah did not stop, but even leaned down to massage both of her legs. Embarrassed, Hazel wanted to pull her feet back, but Noah only smiled. We are husband and wife. What is there to be ashamed of? Hazel felt a sudden shiver. She did not expect that to fully control his target, Noah could act so perfectly. Seeing her staring at him, he teased, your gaze is quite passionate. Hazel quickly turned her head away to deny it, but Noah smiled again and replied, I like seeing you need me. Faced with Noah's close and persistent approach, Hazel realized she had to think of a way to distract him. An idea suddenly flashed in her mind, and she took the opportunity to suggest opening a guild branch in another area. After all, they had just hired more staff, making it the perfect time to expand operations. Noah was somewhat surprised, while Hazel secretly laughed to herself. This was merely an excuse she had just concocted to send him away. On the surface, Hazel sincerely asked Noah to personally help her prepare for the new branch. She figured that since he had played the role of a devoted husband to this extent, he would certainly not refuse her request. Noah asked with concern, will doing this be too hard on you? Hazel immediately went with the flow. As long as you are by my side, I am fine. Noah dotingly agreed, promising to quickly start the investigation and make arrangements. Seeing that her plan was working, Hazel was overjoyed on the outside, while feeling even more smug on the inside. She would take advantage of the time Noah was sent away to escape, determined to make him taste the feeling of betrayal. But before her joy could last long, Noah suddenly grabbed her tightly, making Hazel instantly alert. He took the opportunity to push her onto the bed, smiling as he asked, "Can you spend some time with me today?" Only then did Hazel realize that the moment she let her guard down, she had immediately fallen into a trap. Finally, the day she dreaded facing the most had arrived. Today was not only their first wedding anniversary but also the very last time they would celebrate it together. Hazel gathered her chaotic thoughts and forced herself to get out of bed. She knew she had to act quickly. Before leaving, she had a special gift she wanted to give Noah. Hazel believed that as long as she had loved with all her heart, there would be no regrets upon leaving. She wanted to give Noah everything she had ever wished to offer, gracefully putting an end to this relationship so she wouldn't shed lonely tears for him in the future. Just then, the door opened, and Noah walked in. Hazel casually asked, "How did the urgent matter go?" He calmly replied, "It's been resolved." Hazel recalled that in her half-awake state, Noah had indeed rushed out earlier. She felt uneasy, suspecting that his frequent departures lately were due to him hastily preparing some plan to pressure her. Then Heiser saw the exquisite gemstone necklace placed on her neck and froze. In the past, when passing by the shop, she had only casually praised it for being beautiful. Noah not only said the gemstone's color matched her eyes, but also quietly remembered and bought it as a gift. Heiser once worried the item was too ostentatious, but to Noah, this amount of money was nothing. Looking at such a thoughtful gift, Heiser felt truly grateful that Noah had married her. He lifted her face, gently saying that the truly lucky one was him, and the two held each other tightly. Facing Noah's sincere, deep gaze, Heiser's heart could not help but waver. Fearing he would see through her thoughts, she quickly went along with it and replied in a slightly exaggerated tone, "Being able to marry you is the luckiest thing in my life." But that sudden overreaction instead made Noah realize something was slightly unusual. Feeling embarrassed under his gaze, Hazel asked, "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" Noah gently lifted her cheek, "Because you are so charming." He held her in his arms again, sincerely exclaiming, "Marrying you makes me the luckiest man in the world." Faced with such straightforward affection, Hazel's first instinct was to escape. Wanting to break the atmosphere that was both ambiguous and dangerous, she quickly stood up, "I want to quickly give you your present." Noah indulged her, smiling as he promised, "Today, whatever you want to do, I will cooperate. I will always be by your side." Hazel helped Noah onto the carriage and headed toward the pre-prepared location. To keep it a secret, she carefully blindfolded him, even leaning in close several times to check if he was peeking. Noah cooperatively went along with her, promising that he couldn't see anything. As the carriage slowly came to a halt, Hazel took his hand and reminded him to watch his step. She led Noah through the woods before finally reaching the destination. Hazel then removed his blindfold, saying, "Open your eyes." Before Noah stood a quiet little cottage, surrounded by vibrant, blooming sunflowers. Hazel said straightforwardly, "This is the place I specially built for you." Seeing Noah's sheer astonishment, she quickly explained that she knew he sometimes suffered from headaches and disliked noisy places, which was why she prepared such a peaceful sanctuary. Their lives were completely different. To be able to tolerate and take care of her in every little detail, Noah must have put in a lot of effort. That was what made Hazel truly feel loved, and it was also the first time she had dedicated herself to preparing such a gift. But Hazel understood better than anyone else. It was while reviewing the documents for this unexpected gift that the truth she accidentally discovered shattered all her illusions. Noah gently lifted her face, softly calling her name. Hazel tried to suppress the turmoil in her heart, flashing a radiant smile, "I love you very much, too." Looking at that smile, Noah's eyes became deep and complex. Hazel smiled and asked, "Do you like it?" Noah pulled her into his arms. "I like it very much." Afterward, the two of them stepped inside the house. Seeing the exquisite fireplace, Hazel smiled and introduced, "Even when winter comes, this place will still be very warm." Walking to the kitchen, Noah joked, "Now I can make a hearty meal right away." Hazel laughed, "It's not mealtime yet, having your thoughtful intention is already enough." She led Noah up to the second-floor bedroom, explaining that to prevent him from being disturbed, the windows had been fitted with soundproof magic. No matter how perfect a person is, there are times when they carry heavy thoughts. This was exactly the place where she wanted him to set aside all his work. Even if there came a day when he was angry with her, he could still come here to calm his mind. Noah suddenly hugged her from behind. "Compared to being alone, I would rather rest here with you. As long as it is a gift from you, that is already more than enough for me to be content." He even suggested that they come here every weekend in the future. Hazel was extremely surprised. Noah leaned close to her ear, lowering his voice, "Or should we just stay in our room forever from now on?" Hazel quickly changed the subject, pulling him outside to watch the sunset, and kept saying there were both rabbits and deer around here. Noah couldn't help but laugh. "I also really like small animals, just like you." The two took off their shoes and stepped into the crystal-clear stream, and Hazel led him around all the remaining corners. Seeing that Noah loved the gift so much that he suggested coming here every year on their wedding anniversary, Hazel knew that could not come true, but she still smiled happily and agreed. After that, Hazel assigned the entire task of site surveying and negotiating the opening of the branch to Nigella. Nigella quickly accepted the order and went out to work. Seeing that the eyes and ears monitoring her had finally left, Hazel decided to officially win Ginger over. She actively approached him while he was moving documents and spoke up. "Do you have some time to talk about how you are adapting to the job?" Ginger happily agreed, saying he would come to the office right after putting the documents down. Hazel was very satisfied with his work capability. Ginger also shared that everyone in the guild was extremely welcoming. Just as Hazel was about to use formal titles, Ginger openly told her to just call him by his name. She took the opportunity to change her way of address and said, "I plan to assign a private mission to you, but before that, I want to confirm something." Ginger joked that being personally assigned a task by the guild master made him a bit nervous, yet he still told her to go ahead and ask. Hearing this, Hazel's gaze suddenly darkened. "How many benefits has Killer Hadid given you?" Faced with the sudden and stern question, Ginger looked completely confused, saying he didn't hear clearly and didn't know any killer. But seeing Hazel's extremely serious attitude, he said, "If the guildmaster needs, I can help you investigate that person right now." Hazel coldly refused. She slowly stood up, closed the distance, grabbed Ginger's collar, and snatched away the necklace he was wearing. "Wearing a gold spiritual stone capable of blocking illusions, yet you still dare to play dumb in front of me?" Without waiting for Ginger to react, Hazel decisively channeled her magic, crushing the necklace into fine powder. She coldly said, "This thing has no effect on me." Looking at the shattered pieces scattered all over the ground, Ginger fell to the ground in panic. He painfully questioned why she destroyed it, crying that it was the only relic his parents had left behind. Heiser stood by, coldly watching the woman who had lost control on the floor. Ginger burst into tears, endlessly blaming herself for failing to protect her parents' keepsake. Facing someone completely broken down, Heiser was momentarily flustered and rushed forward to comfort her. However, Heiser quickly regained composure and bluntly cut through that clumsy performance. "Not only are your parents still living very well, but they also secretly visit you every year. Furthermore, the magic necklace I just broke is an expensive model newly released this year, absolutely not an old keepsake." With the lie exposed on the spot, Ginger, who had just been crying her heart out, instantly became tongue-tied. No longer needing to pretend, she went straight to the point and confessed her actual pay. Learning that Killer paid Ginger 500,000 gold coins per month, Heiser was secretly startled. Ginger also dropped her usual respectful tone, frankly stating that she did not understand why the opponent paid so much. She never expected to meet such a dangerous figure who could thoroughly investigate her identity. Hazel immediately reminded her to mind her attitude. Only then did Ginger feel a bit embarrassed and quickly added honorifics. Hazel silently calculated that the massive salary was indeed much higher than the treatment in the Night Order. No wonder no matter how cruel Killer's methods were, his subordinates still obeyed him unconditionally. Hazel even briefly entertained the idea of switching to work for him. However, she quickly snapped out of it, reminding herself that keeping her life was still the most important thing. To completely win Ginger over, Hazel directly offered an even more attractive proposal: I will pay double. Take these 2 million gold coins as an advance deposit. Ginger realized Heiser wanted her to betray Killer. She frankly stated that once this matter was exposed, she would definitely die without a grave. Heiser remained extremely calm, replying that as long as they were not caught with her methods, there would absolutely be no loopholes. After that, Heiser seriously pointed out that the money Killer paid was completely insufficient to buy back the freedom of her lover. The real reason Ginger risked her life to save money was far more important than paying off her parents' debts. The man she loved was a slave who could lose his life in the arena at any moment. Heiser loudly reminded her that the more battles a slave gladiator won, the more his value would increase. Betraying Killer and cooperating with her was the only wise choice. Heiser also solemnly promised that after succeeding, she would help both of them erase their past identities to start a new life. Hazel smiled and added, "It is fine if you refuse, I can use magic to erase this memory at any time." Knowing that her secret had been seen through, and wanting to save her lover, Ginger finally bowed her head in compromise. "What do you need me to do?" A satisfied smile appeared on Hazel's lips. "I only need you to deceive someone for a very short time." Elsewhere, Killer leaned on the sofa, gently playing with the golden key in his hand. He suddenly recalled the scene from not long ago, when Hazel took his hand and led him to the house in the middle of the sunflower field, smilingly saying that she also wanted to express her deep love for him. Killer silently calculated. The plan had shifted slightly from its original path. He had only wanted to give her a gift to play along, but he did not expect Hazel to have the exact same intention. This made him feel that she was truly adorable. Killer stared intently at the key in his hand. Flowers bloomed all over the villa along with exquisite window frames, all showing that Heiser had put her heart into the arrangement. Preparing such a luxurious house must have taken months. Out of appreciation for that sincerity, Killer even began to hesitate whether to postpone his plan to eliminate her. After all, Heiser had long been under his control, and keeping her by his side could also help amuse him. But without him knowing when, Heiser's shadow had occupied his mind at all times. That strange entanglement beyond his control made Killer silently irritated. Then he smiled faintly, concluding to himself that his wavering was only because he had decided to personally deal with her. Just then, a subordinate rushed over to report. Interrupted in his thoughts, Killer was extremely displeased, asking in a cold voice, "What happened?" The subordinate confessed that the previously assigned mission had failed. The messenger sent could not bring the purifying divine stone back from the temple. Killian found it utterly absurd and coldly asked, "I have paid the full reward." The subordinate hastily explained that the temple said the stone had already chosen its master, so they refused to hand it over. That incompetence made Killian extremely irritated, and he immediately ordered the disposal of the entire useless bunch of subordinates. However, right after that, his thoughts shifted to the fact that he must have dinner with Hazel tonight. Recalling her joyful expression in the small eatery last time, he even planned to take her to the streets to try some popular dishes. Killian originally disdained street food for not being clean enough. But thinking that it could make Hazel happy, he felt that breaking the rule once in a while was perfectly fine. The subordinate continued to report the newly investigated clue, stating that the purifying sacred stone is currently in the hands of the crown prince's lover. If they act recklessly, the consequences might be very difficult to handle. Killer heard this and did not care at all. She is not even the crown princess yet, so there is nothing to worry about. But the subordinate hesitantly added that the owner of the stone is also a friend of that person. Under Killer's cold, pressing gaze, he was momentarily flustered, not knowing how to address Hazel in front of his master. In the end, the subordinate could only bow his head and explain, "The owner of that stone is actually a friend of the prisoner next to you." The prisoner he spoke of was indeed Hazel. Recently, Killer's subordinates had all been having a headache over one question: how on earth should they address the woman beside their master? In their eyes, Hazel was merely a tool that Killer had captured for revenge, so how they addressed her initially did not matter. However, as time went by, if anyone used even a slightly disrespectful title for her, Killer's gaze would instantly turn terrifying. This left everyone utterly baffled. She was clearly someone who would be disposed of sooner or later, so why did their master react in such a manner? In the end, the subordinate chose a compromise and referred to Hazel as a prisoner. He believed that once Killer disposed of her, all their worries would naturally vanish, and thus he hoped this troublesome drama would end soon. However, since participating in that absurd play, Killer had become unusually tolerant. This even made his subordinates secretly wish that such days could last a little longer. Because Killer originally hated being disturbed by others the most, yet every time Heiser enthusiastically bothered him, he responded more actively than anyone else. Knowing that the owner of the purifying divine stone was related to Heiser, Killer remembered she used to be a member of the Night Order. Considering that the Crown Prince's faction was secretly on guard, he took the opportunity to decide to temporarily avoid conflict. His nearby subordinates grumbled in secret, as he clearly had not cared about the Crown Prince at all just moments ago, yet the moment it involved Heiser, he immediately changed his tune. Killer did not explain further, only ordering to continue searching for another purifying sacred stone. The persistent headache made him extremely irritable. When would this physical torment finally end? According to his subordinate's memory, the mysterious illness had tortured Killer for over 10 years. Whenever it flared up, he would not only harbor senseless killing intent, but his mood would also instantly plunge into an abyss. He was even swallowed by intense, uncontrollable desires. Killer was someone accustomed to holding everything in his hands, deeply loathing anything outside of his control. Thus, losing control over his emotions made him feel utterly miserable. His subordinates had sought countless famous doctors, but none could find the cause of the pain. It was not until a few years ago that Killer happened to obtain a high-grade purifying divine stone, which finally eased the severe pain that had haunted him for years. Even so, the wild urges hidden within his body were not completely erased. Then one day, Killer completely lost his mind, the only purifying stone shattered on the spot, and he had no memory of what happened that night. His subordinates did not know why he was enraged, nor did they know how the stone shattered, so they could only constantly search for a replacement. However, ordinary purifying stones were completely useless to Killer, only those with extremely powerful divine power could take effect. Fortunately, since meeting Hazel, the frequency of Killian's headaches has decreased significantly, even making it seem like he no longer needs the purifying sacred stone. However, this is still only a temporary solution. Once he is away from Hazel, the physical pain will strike again. His subordinates helplessly said that Hazel would be dealt with sooner or later, so they must find a replacement sacred stone. Ironically, the current stone is in the hands of the Crown Prince's fiancée. If the original stone had not broken, things would not have been this troublesome. Killian did not respond to the matter of the stone, only coldly asking if there were any other reports. His subordinate quickly reported that the last escaped traitor had been captured, asking for instructions on how to handle it. But Killian glanced at the time, realizing it was time for Hazel to off work, so he immediately stood up to leave. Seeing him leave abruptly, the subordinate flusteredly chased after him, asking how the traitor should be handled. Killer only told him to prepare the carriage, leaving the rest to his own discretion. Previously, tasks like dealing with traitors were always executed by Killer himself. Faced with this unusual decision, the subordinate did not dare to ask further and quickly ran to prepare the carriage. In the blink of an eye, night had fallen. Noah had long since returned to Heiser's side, gently holding her hands. Held in his arms, Heiser watched him continuously rub her hands while she kept murmuring in her mind. She even thought Noah was memorizing her fingerprints to prevent her from running away. She even planned to go to the bank to change her registration details before leaving. Just then, a subordinate arrived to report, interrupting the atmosphere. Noah instantly hid his cold expression, smiling as he explained to Heiser. The person he had sent on a mission during the day had sent word, so he had to make a trip over there. Looking at the retreating backs of the two people, Hazel recognized them as Noah's most trusted confidants. She guessed that this matter must be extremely important. She hid outside the wall to eavesdrop, and inside, they seemed to be discussing the heavy rain causing a collapse that needed repairs. The intermittent sounds made Hazel break into a cold sweat. She thought they were saying the pit used to bury her had collapsed due to the rain and now had to be redug. But then, an order to suspend the operation echoed from inside the room. Hazel was overjoyed, believing the gift she gave had worked, and the plan to eliminate her was finally put on hold. She secretly celebrated because she had gained more time to prepare for her escape. This way, she wouldn't have to rush and could arrange everything more thoroughly. However, the conversation in the room was nothing like what Hazel had imagined. The subordinate was reporting on the progress of road repairs and fence reinforcement. Killian was extremely satisfied, as this was the wedding anniversary gift he had prepared for Heiser. Although it was slower than expected, Killian was finally able to give her a decent present. He had secretly poured his heart into it, preparing to move Heiser's entire small guild to a vast plot of land and expand it into a massive facility. His subordinate, Sayasti, once did not understand and curiously asked him why he had to go to such lengths. Killian frankly replied that it was all simply to satisfy himself. Clearly, Heiser had taken his money and run away, yet now she was working tirelessly day in and day out in that cramped building. Just thinking about it made him incredibly frustrated. Even though he was destined to personally deal with Heiser in the future, he would absolutely never allow her to live in such destitution. Hearing this, the subordinate was utterly shocked and could not believe his ears. Could the 5-story building that Killian had prepared really be used just as a warehouse? Killian overbearingly ordered him to shut up. In truth, the construction was delayed because Hazel had suddenly fallen ill, and heavy rains had collapsed the roads. Killian took this opportunity to double the reinforcement of the surrounding fences. He upgraded the security level because monsters had recently appeared, almost putting Hazel in danger. Just remembering that incident made Killian's face instantly darken. In his eyes, Hazel could only die by his hands. Absolutely nothing was allowed to snatch her away first. Then, the subordinate hesitantly reminded him, the anniversary has long passed. Isn't it a bit late to give it now? Killian, however, replied with absolute confidence, when the time comes, Hazel will surely smile and forgive me. The subordinate could only helplessly accept the order, promising to complete the construction properly. He then continued to report on the progress of finding the purifying sacred stone, saying they would search throughout the empire. Killer waved his hand to Lewis. He was also preparing to return and cooperate with Hazel, continuing to play out the rest of the play. Having finished eavesdropping, Hazel hurriedly ran back before being discovered. She quickly lay down on the long chair, pretending to be asleep. Killer approached and looked at her, feeling a bit regretful. Originally, he wanted to listen to this girl ramble for a little longer. Hazel tried to maintain the appearance of being fast asleep, afraid of showing even a single slip-up. But she had no idea that Killer had seen through everything long ago. Every time Hazel worried about being pestered by him that night, she would use this trick to escape. Looking at that clumsy acting skill, Killer could only sigh helplessly. He didn't know when she would finally realize she had been exposed long ago. Out of respect for this lovely appearance, he decided to spare her for one night, choosing not to expose her pretense. Killer gently picked Hazel up and silently walked into the house. On the way back to the room, her loose, long orange-red hair caught his attention. At times, her hair emitted an unusually brilliant glow, which was clearly not a glowing magic beast, yet it sparkled so beautifully. Feeling strange, Killian suddenly realized that Heiser was not pretending at all, she had truly fallen fast asleep. It seemed that lately, busy with that small business of hers, she was indeed exhausted to the point of depletion. Killian could not understand why she spent so much effort just to earn some pocket money. That night, holding the fast-asleep Heiser in his arms, for the first time, he had the urge to gaze at her all night long. To justify looking at her for just a little longer, he kept making up absurd excuses. He only wanted to lean closer and engrave this scene deep into his memory. The next day, Hazel went to the bustling street, quietly waiting for someone. Suddenly, a voice called out from afar, "Hazel." Hazel looked over and quickly recognized Annie, a friend she hadn't seen in a long time. As soon as they saw each other, they warmly embraced. Annie was the one Dylan had specially sent to support her. Don't look down on her just because of her bubbly personality. She was an expert at solving all kinds of trouble, never selling out her clients and never failing. The only issue was her extremely high fee, with just one consultation costing a whole gold coin. Fortunately, Hazel had accumulated quite a bit of money. Annie took Hazel to her headquarters. Looking at the majestic building in front of her, Hazel couldn't help but be amazed by its massive scale. Annie smiled and explained that this facility had been operating for over a year. Hazel casually asked about Dylan's recent situation. Annie said he was doing well, just busy recruiting personnel on a large scale. After going inside and confirming the room was soundproofed, Hazel stopped being formal and told Annie to speak normally. Annie also immediately went straight to the point, asking what kind of task Hazel wanted to assign this time. But Hazel was in no hurry to talk about the main business. First, she took off the necklace she was wearing and asked Annie to check if there was any tracking magic on it. Annie immediately opened the chest she brought along and took out the specialized magic tool to inspect it for her. After scanning the necklace, the result made Annie extremely astonished. There was absolutely no tracking magic on the necklace at all. Hearing this, Hazel could not help but be stunned. Annie continued, "There is indeed a type of magic on this, but it is absolutely not used for tracking." She explained that it was protective magic. As long as she carried it with her, it would automatically erect a defensive barrier in times of danger. Hazel did not expect such a result. Upon closer inspection, Annie discovered that the magic power within the stone was still flowing stably. This was not a single-use item but permanent magic, with no limit on the number of activations. Annie blurted out, "Where did you get this?" Hazel honestly replied, "It was a wedding anniversary gift from my husband." But in her heart, she still muttered to herself that perhaps he intentionally did not attach tracking magic because he was afraid she would suspect him. Hazel silently sighed, indeed worthy of the mastermind behind it all, his work truly left no loopholes. Annie said in astonishment that a treasure of this level could not be bought with just money, and her husband must surely love her to madness. Hazel's face turned serious. "This time, the reason I looked for you is because of that very husband." After hearing the whole story, Annie trembled with fear, unable to believe that the person who gifted the necklace was actually Keller. Looking at Hazel's solemn expression, Annie completely broke down. Did she sell out her country in her past life to end up marrying such a terrifying person in this life? Hazel spoke frankly, "If I had known his true identity, I would absolutely never have married such a dangerous man. Now, if I want to survive, I must find a way to get a divorce and run far away." She officially proposed a cooperation to Annie. Realizing this mission could be life-threatening, Annie tentatively asked, "What if I refuse?" Hazel calmly replied, "I have no other choice. Even if I'm left alone, I will still do it." Hearing her say this, Annie felt a bit guilty. Hazel quickly added, "As long as you agree to help, in addition to a high reward, I can also provide valuable investment information." Annie instantly became suspicious. As usually, only scammers constantly talk about investment opportunities. Hazel told her not to jump to conclusions, then revealed that the price of the purifying divine stone was about to skyrocket, advising Annie to start buying them in large quantities right now. Annie listened but remained highly skeptical. In her eyes, those were just cheap souvenirs sold at the temple, with almost no practical use. Hazel understood why she didn't believe it. Currently, in the eyes of outsiders, the purifying divine stone indeed had no special effects and was extremely cheap. But according to the original plot, as the demand to subjugate demonic beasts increases, the lands will become severely polluted, making even daily drinking water a problem. At that time, the purifying divine stone will be a life-saving item. No matter how high the price is, people will scramble to buy it, and supply will not meet demand. Unable to reveal that she knew the future beforehand, Hazel used her mercenary work as an excuse. She said that recently, the number of missions related to demonic beasts had risen sharply, and the public's anxiety was also growing. Annie immediately understood. To feel safe, citizens would buy the purifying divine stone in large quantities as a protective amulet. Combined with information from her own network, Annie realized this was definitely a business opportunity. She even came up with the idea to seize this chance and make a fortune to change her life. Seeing Hazel looking at her in confusion, Annie immediately laughed it off and brought the conversation back to the main topic. How had she planned her escape route? Annie said bluntly that Killer's power was widespread, so choosing a random place to hide would be completely useless. The best way was to leave the Empire and seek political asylum. To escape that man, Heiser had to hide in a place where his reach could not extend. After all, he was so stubborn that he would even go as far as getting married just to capture someone. Hearing the analysis, Heiser quickly confirmed, "So you agree to help me?" Annie replied helplessly, "Out of respect for the generous reward, I can only accept. Besides, I was troubled a lot by Killer's subordinates before, and I have been annoyed with him for a long time. This is the perfect time to settle the score." Hearing Annie agree with her own ears, the heavy stone in Hazel's heart finally lifted. She quickly expressed her gratitude, and could now rest assured to prepare her escape plan. Just as Hazel wanted to discuss the details thoroughly, Annie suddenly slapped the table, interrupting her, "There is one thing I must state beforehand." Hazel startled, fearing that Annie might change her mind, as she herself had no other leverage left to persuade her. To her surprise, Annie pleaded in panic, "You must do your absolute best to keep me from meeting Killer. I don't have the confidence to act for long in front of that man. If I slip up and leak any information, we are all doomed." Seeing Annie grow increasingly terrified as she spoke, Hazel finally realized that even someone as experienced as her was extremely wary of Killer's reputation. Fortunately, Annie had no intention of giving up on the mission. After reaching an agreement, Annie pretended to be a friend visiting from afar for a vacation, while Heiser took her around to sightsee the city. Hearing that Heiser had a friend visiting, Killer did not suspect anything at all. He even supported her going out to relax with her friend more often. Thanks to everyone's cooperation in covering for them, Heiser and Annie could openly and legitimately discuss their escape route and preparations. Annie pointed out that if Heiser suddenly disappeared, Killer would quickly hunt her down. Therefore, she needed to create a reasonable window of time in advance to distance herself from her husband. Heiser immediately thought of an opportunity, as a gathering of the guilds was about to be held in the royal capital. She decided to use that event as a legitimate reason to separate from Noah, taking the opportunity to complete the subsequent arrangements. Hearing this, Annie also nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, on the other side, Killer had begun to notice everything. Ever since Hazel mentioned wanting to expand her business, she had been making excuses every day to stay busy outside with Annie. After that friend arrived, the two of them no longer left work together, and Hazel frequently returned home late. At first, Killer thought that with Hazel being busy, he would also have some peace and quiet. However, looking at the empty house, an inexplicable sense of irritation welled up inside him. Seeing his dark expression, his subordinate assumed that Hazel had annoyed him. He casually suggested, "Since you will have to deal with her sooner or later anyway, why not make a move right now?" Killer suddenly turned around and cut him off coldly, "Right now, I do not want to hear about those things." Being coldly dismissed, the subordinate was extremely bewildered. Lately, the phrase Killer uttered the most was that he was not in the mood. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. According to the original plan, things should absolutely not have developed this way. In the past, Killer had never shown mercy to traitors. He would rather stain his own hands with syrup than hesitate. Yet now, he not only delayed repeatedly, but also made exceptions for Heiser time and time again. An absurd thought suddenly crossed the subordinate's mind. Could Killer have actually developed feelings for Heiser? Would that cold and ruthless man really feel pity for a prisoner who was already completely in his hands? Unable to hold back, the subordinate asked directly, "Could it be that you have gone soft on Heiser?" Killer stepped closer, cold laughing as he retorted, "How could I pity a prisoner?" The subordinate replied frankly, "If that weren't the case, the current situation couldn't be explained. Heiser stole your information and assets, but the time, effort, and money you spent to punish her far exceeded the value of what was taken. You even gave her the necklace with permanent protective magic, something money can't buy." He continued, "In your eyes, Heiser should have been as small as a speck of dust. If those unusual actions weren't out of soft-heartedness, what else could they be?" Faced with that question, Killer did not deny it this time. On the contrary, he admitted that his subordinate's words were not entirely wrong. Every morning, looking at Heiser curled up fast asleep, an inexplicable emotion indeed arose in his heart. If that inexplicable feeling had to be called pity, it sounded quite appropriate. But Killer suddenly changed his tone. Who allowed you to say Heiser is small and insignificant? The subordinate was completely bewildered, as he was clearly the one who had just nodded in agreement. Facing Killer's sudden anger, the subordinate quickly bowed his head to apologize to save his own life. Only then did Killer snort coldly, warning him to watch his words in the future. As for how to handle Heiser, he simply said there was no need to pay special attention, and he would naturally take action when the time was right. On the surface, the subordinate respectfully obeyed, but internally he was terrified. If things continued like this, the entire situation would sooner or later spiral completely out of control. As darkness gradually fell, the conversation filled with each person's secret calculations finally came to an end. As soon as Heiser stepped out the door, he saw a carriage waiting by the roadside. Noah had purposely changed into an elegant formal outfit, making her ask in confusion, "Today is not a special day, why are you dressed so formally?" Noah gently replied, "I only want to always appear before you in my best look." Then, he urged her to get into the carriage to rest. But when the carriage was halfway through the journey, Hazel looked at the scenery outside and suddenly noticed something unusual. This was absolutely not the way back home. She quickly called out to Noah, "Where are you taking me?" Noah just smiled and asked, "Are you curious?" Hazel immediately flinched, even worrying that her escape plan had been exposed. But then Noah casually pointed to his cheek, signaling for a kiss as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Hazel's suspended heart finally settled down a bit. Since he was still in the mood to play around like this, it proved that she was not in any immediate life-threatening danger. She decided to comply with his request, leaning over to kiss Noah's cheek before asking again, "Where on earth are we going?" Noah only said he wanted to help the guild expand its scale. Just then, the carriage stopped in front of a magnificent mansion. Hazel did not yet understand what the guild had to do with this place when Noah got off the carriage and declared, "This is the second wedding anniversary gift I prepared for you." Looking at the astonished Hazel, he explained that this grand gift was originally supposed to be given with the necklace, but the road construction delayed the progress, so it was only completed today. Facing the majestic building before her eyes, Hazel could not believe it actually belonged to her. If the other party intended to divorce sooner or later, why would he generously give such a grand gift? Noah patiently explained that the safety of this place was higher than the previous guild building. Nearby, there was also a private lounge for mercenaries, making it convenient to handle any unexpected incidents. Only now did Hazel understand, realizing her previous fears were in vain, thinking he was looking for a place to bury her. Confirming there was no threat to her life, she finally breathed a sigh of relief and happily thanked Noah. He said with a bit of regret, "If only I could have given you the necklace and the building at the same time, our gifts would have felt more like destiny." Hazel also went along with it, "If I had known this sooner, I wouldn't have let my mind wander so much before." She shyly reminded him that her return gift was only a small villa. Noah immediately pulled her into his arms. "Whether the house is big or small doesn't matter, as long as it proves that my wife loves me." Lying in Noah's arms, Hazel still kept a clear mind. No matter how sweet his words were, she would absolutely not fall into his trap again. She smoothly brought up the main point, "I almost forgot something important." Noah teased, "Are you planning to confess to me again?" Hazel smiled and played along, then took the opportunity to leave his embrace. She hesitantly confessed, "In a while, I will have to leave you temporarily." Hazel said she needed to go to the royal capital. She planned to use that as a breakthrough point to gradually distance herself from him, eventually escaping his control. Not long after, Hazel dressed in a splendid gown, sitting in the grand hall while several artists carefully painted her portrait. She asked Noah in confusion, "Today isn't a special occasion, so why do you suddenly want to paint my portrait?" Noah crossed his arms, complaining gloomily, "Not seeing my wife for a week makes me feel like my lifespan is shortening." Heiser could only apologize helplessly. It turned out that on the very day they received the mansion, Heiser had proposed going to the royal capital to attend the guild conference. The two of them immediately argued about it. Faced with his wife suddenly leaving for a week, Noah was flustered and did not know what to do. Heiser could only patiently explain to soothe him. Originally, she planned to go for 2 weeks, but Noah insisted on coming along. To avoid ruining her escape plan, she had no choice but to take a step back and shorten the time to 1 week. On the surface, Hazel agreed to return a week later, but in her heart, she was planning to leave for good this time, never to return. Looking at the busy painters in front of her, she was secretly worried, only hoping that these portraits would not turn into wanted posters later on. Beside her, Noah was still full of frustration. No matter how unwilling he was deep down, in the end, he still could not stop Hazel's decision. Faced with Noah's question, Hazel explained that after seeing the new guild building, she had changed her mind. She wanted to take this opportunity to go to the royal capital to promote the expansion of the guild. To make the trip sound more convincing, Hazel played on his emotions, saying she wanted to devote herself to developing the guild that the two of them had built together. Looking at her sincerity, although Noah remained cold, he finally compromised. As Hazel walked, she secretly calculated that taking this opportunity to keep some distance from Noah was also a good thing. But before taking more than a few steps, Noah suddenly stopped and seriously called the painter. Hazel was startled by this unusual behavior, thinking he was finally showing his true colors. To her surprise, Noah excitedly protested, claiming they had drawn her wrong and that Hazel's eyelashes were clearly 0.001 millimeters longer than in the painting. He acted so passionately, insisting that since he hadn't seen her all week, the painting must look exactly like the real person. Hazel stood beside him, completely dazed, only able to sigh to herself that this man was truly dramatic, and his obsession was unbelievably terrifying. Faced with Noah nitpicking every detail, the painter took the opportunity to raise the price tenfold, even teasingly asking if they should modify the nail length as well. That repeatedly adjusted portrait was finally hung in Killer's study. On the day of departure, the luggage was loaded onto the carriage one by one. The journey to the royal capital officially began. Hazel used the excuse of assigning a mission to send Yahello away, successfully gaining some time to escape her surveillance. While pondering how to guard against Killer, Hazel was suddenly embraced from behind by Noah. "Have a safe trip. If you need anything, just contact me through the communication crystal." Hazel smiled and reassured him, saying that since she grew up in the royal capital, nothing would go wrong. Noah took all those gestures into his eyes. Hearing Hazel say she had to travel far to the royal capital, he did not hesitate to lean down and kiss her deeply. Startled, Hazel quickly reminded him that there were people around. But Noah did not care at all. He still pressed close, stubbornly wanting her to respond. Seeing Hazel's bewildered look, Noah squeezed her hands tightly, begging her again and again, "Say that you love me." The sudden request left Hazel stunned on the spot. In the end, she still complied with his wish, whispering, "I love you." Then, she tightly embraced Noah in front of her. Killer fully felt that affection, yet his mood still plummeted to the bottom of the abyss. He realized that the deep look Hazel gave Noah was completely different from the way she looked at his true self. Reason told him that he had no reason to care, but the scene before him still made Killer feel frustrated and unbearably defeated. The things he once considered trivial were now crazily torturing his nerves. Hazel reluctantly embraced him. "This is the first time we have been apart for so long, I just feel strange. Once I arrive at the royal capital, I will contact you frequently, so don't find me annoying then." Hearing those kind words of advice, Killer smiled in response, his suspended heart finally settling down. He had originally worried that Hazel had changed her mind, but now it seemed he was just overthinking, as her heart was clearly still set on him. However, to be safe, Killer still decided to secretly investigate whether anyone with malicious intentions was trying to sneak up on Hazel. After all, he didn't want anyone coming between them. At the same time, Dylan was walking down the corridor in frustration, almost going crazy as he asked around, "Is there any truly talented illusionist around here?" Troubled by this difficult problem, he suddenly sighed, if only Hazel were here right now. The carriage bumped along the entire journey, finally entering the royal capital smoothly. Looking at the iconic tall structures outside the window, Hazel was secretly moved. After a full year, she had finally returned to this familiar city. Looking at the magic spheres hanging on the street, Hazel suddenly thought of escaping immediately, running straight to the border. But she knew well that if she acted hastily now, she would quickly be tracked down and captured. After arriving at the hotel, Hazel left the luggage packing to her maid. She instructed that she had to go to the guild headquarters first, and then have dinner with a friend. Once everything was arranged, she adjusted her outfit and left the hotel. Walking alone on the streets of the royal capital, Hazel felt an emptiness in her heart without Noah by her side. For over a year, he had always been by her side, protecting her. Although she had temporarily regained her freedom, Hazel understood that she absolutely could not let her guard down. To completely escape in the future, she had to quickly get used to the days without Noah. She silently encouraged herself, composed her emotions, and walked toward the guild building. At the reception desk, Hazel presented her guild master certification and submitted her application to attend the meeting. After the staff verified the information, she was directed to the mercenary lounge to wait. Hazel pushed the door open, intending to take this opportunity to rest and relax. To her surprise, as soon as she looked up, she saw Dylan already inside the room. Both of them were stunned. Dylan stood up in shock and asked, "Why are you here?" Hazel calmly replied, "I am the guild master. Isn't it perfectly normal for me to come to the guild for work? And you, why are you here?" Dylan explained that he was there to find a partner, then immediately complained. "You came to the royal capital without letting me know. If we hadn't run into each other today, you probably had no intention of visiting me, right?" Confronted with his questioning, Hazel felt a pang of guilt and could only mumble to herself, "To be honest, I didn't plan to meet you at first." Dylan was heavily crestfallen, blaming her for being too cold. After all, they hadn't seen each other for a year and a half. Facing her friend who was full of resentment, Hazel felt even more guilty. She quickly explained that she just wanted to rest first, and would definitely send him a message later. Indeed, they had been apart for too long. The deep bond between Hazel and Dylan must be traced back to their days at the academy. Their academy was extremely strict. Overcoming countless hardships together had forged a strong comradeship between the two. Even though many years had passed, whenever one side encountered difficulties, the other would still offer help without any hesitation. During the demonic beast subjugation graduation exam that year, a pack of high-level demonic beasts suddenly attacked. Dylan was severely injured in the battle and cornered. At the critical moment of life and death, Hazel timely cast her illusion magic, saving him from mortal danger. From that day on, Dylan called her a one-man army. However, that deep relationship was built by the original Hazel before she transmigrated into this body. Hazel's memory went back to the day she decided to leave the Night Order. Dylan closely put his arm around her shoulder to greet her. Hazel did not understand why he still wore his military uniform during his vacation. Then, she took out the resignation letter in her hand and declared with a smile, "Today, I will leave the Night Order." Dylan was completely shocked, thinking she was joking, but Hazel affirmed that she was entirely serious. "I am tired of those subjugation expeditions, now I just want to rest, it is time to stop." Dylan could not accept that decision. Years ago, she had said that no matter what, she had to become the commander of the order. Heiser calmly replied that with the crown prince there, she could never be appointed, and besides, she was just a commoner. Dylan excitedly said that if anyone dared to mock her background, he would personally beat them up. Heiser asked in return, would doing that really solve the problem? Dylan was speechless, only able to stare at her in daze. Heiser said her decision to resign had been carefully thought out. Leaving the Night Order did not mean her life was over, and she would still return to visit everyone frequently in the future. Dylan immediately brought up the past, saying she made it sound so easy, yet the result was she hadn't shown her face all year, without even a single short message. Heiser could only apologize guiltily, admitting that too many things had happened over the past year, leaving her exhausted. Seeing this, Dylan took the opportunity to suggest, if you really feel guilty, do me a favor. Right now, I urgently need a top illusionist who can replace 100 people. He said frankly that no one but Heiser could handle this difficult matter. Heiser asked helplessly, you flatter me so much, what on earth do you want me to do? Only then did Dylan reveal his true purpose. He wanted Heiser to help guide a fellow illusionist. Heiser thought he wanted her to go to the academy to teach students. Dylan quickly waved his hands, explaining that the person needing guidance was not a student, but a rookie just recruited by the Night Order. He seriously added that the newcomer had a massive problem, clearly an illusionist, but completely unable to use illusions. Heiser listened in confusion, finding it as absurd as saying a royal chef did not know how to cook. Hazel began to doubt the recruitment standards of the Night Order, wondering how such a person could be accepted. Dylan sighed helplessly, explaining that the recruit indeed possessed a talent for illusion, but for some reason, could not cast it. Seeing Heiser's bewildered expression, Dylan stood up resolutely and begged her to meet that person just once. As long as Heiser agreed to guide the rookie, he would deeply appreciate this great favor. Determined to persuade her, Dylan began to cling to her persistently. Heiser sensed something strange about this matter and advised him to outright give up on using that illusionist. Seeing that approach failed, Dylan immediately offered a trade. Because of the abnormal appearance of demonic beasts, the Night Order required all guilds to submit demonic beast samples every month. If only Heiser was willing to help, he could make an exception and exempt her guild from this mission. Initially, Hazel intended to run far away, thinking she could just leave the guild's work to kill her, but she quickly realized that the monthly requirement to submit specimens was highly unusual. She also knew very well that if she really dumped all the guild's work onto Killer, that guy would surely fly into a rage and even hunt her down to the ends of the earth. After weighing the pros and cons, Hazel could only helplessly compromise. The guidance probably wouldn't take too much time, right? Hearing this, Dylan was immediately thrilled. With her skills, it would take a few hours at most to get it done. Seeing Dylan kneel down to thank her on the spot, the surrounding customers turned to gossip. Hazel was speechless and quickly told him to stand up first. Precisely because of such eccentric actions, for a long time Dylan was even nicknamed the Mad Dog by other mercenaries. Hearing Hazel recount what had just happened, Annie exclaimed, "I also wanted to see Dylan crawling on the ground with my own eyes. Had I known, I would have gone with you." Afterward, she casually mentioned Killer, who was far away. Thinking about having to set out again tomorrow, Annie filled her wine glass and raised it. "Come on, cheers to today's successful work." Hazel raised her glass in thanks, while reminding Annie that if she encountered any emergency, she could come to the Wilson Hotel to find her at any time. Originally, Hazel had planned to stay at the same hotel as Annie, but Killer insisted that she must stay at the Wilson. Therefore, she had to stay there to draw his attention, creating conditions for Annie to act alone. Annie also casually added that the top floor of the Wilson Hotel was built entirely according to Imperial Palace standards. Hazel sighed inwardly and said that she would definitely inspect her room thoroughly upon her return. The two clinked their glasses, happily chatting about everything that had happened during the day. However, amidst the lively atmosphere, Hazel's eyes gradually became deep and contemplative. No matter how relaxed and cheerful she appeared on the outside, a void that could not be filled still lingered deep within her heart. Whenever it fell quiet, Noah's silhouette would quietly surface in her mind. Looking at the red wine swirling in her glass, Hazel silently wondered what she could use to fill this massive emptiness. After the meeting ended, Hazel returned to the Winston Hotel alone. Just as she arrived in front of her room, she saw Nigella already standing there waiting. Nigella respectfully said, "Welcome back, guild leader." Hazel was slightly taken aback. "When did you arrive?" Nigella only replied that she had just got here. Hazel smiled and exposed her. "We have known each other for so long, I know your character too well. You must have been standing here waiting the whole time, without even eating dinner." Being seen through, Nigella felt a bit embarrassed. Hazel said she would not handle any more work today, telling her to go have dinner quickly. Afterward, Hazel turned around and pushed open the door to her room. As soon as she walked in, she collapsed onto the bed in exhaustion. Looking at the vast and empty bed, Hazel could not help but wonder if it had always been this big. The maid hurriedly came over to advise her to sit up to help her change clothes. Hazel thanked her and cooperated to stand up. While changing, her gaze swept across the communication crystal ball on the desk. Hazel knew well that in her current dazed state, if she carelessly contacted Noah, she would likely reveal her emotions. She suppressed the urge to call him, unbuttoned her collar, and prepared to rest. Hazel thought to herself with self-deprecation that if she did not initiate contact, the opponent might completely drop his disguise. Who knows, maybe he was feeling extremely relaxed at this moment. But in the mansion on the other side, Killer sat alone at his desk, his fingers tapping irritably on the wooden surface. Seeing the unresponsive communication orb, his gaze darkened. He could not understand why Hazel had not called him yet. As the night grew deeper, Killer stood alone in front of Hazel's portrait. Meanwhile, the orb on the table remained completely silent. Heiser had clearly promised to contact him upon arrival, yet there was still no news. He tried to find an excuse for her. Surely, Heiser had been walking around the royal capital all day, so being exhausted was only natural. Yet, he remained deeply anxious, unable to understand how she could completely forget his existence. Just how tired must she be to not even send a single message? In the end, Killer could only stand in the empty room, letting out a soft sigh. He gazed at the portrait on the wall, lamenting that it could not capture even 1/10,000th of Heiser's beauty. The unfillable longing in his heart showed no signs of fading. Killer only felt that tonight was extraordinarily long and lonely. The next morning, he sat at his desk very early, beginning to process documents. A dull headache washed over him. Looking out the window, he realized he had stayed up all night until dawn. Just then, his subordinate pushed the door open, holding some documents, and was shocked to find his superior had been working since early morning, still wearing yesterday's clothes. "Did you stay up all night, sir?" Killer coldly cut off that overreaction, demanding today's documents. While handing over the files, the subordinate sensed an unusual aura around him. He keenly realized that whenever Killer was in a bad mood, the surrounding atmosphere would become so heavy that other people's vision seemed to blur. Killer looked at the report in his hand and questioned coldly, "Why hasn't the trouble written in the report been completely cleaned up? Do you think I will overlook this negligence?" The subordinate was pushed to panic, not knowing how to explain at the moment. Just as the heavy atmosphere reached its peak, the glass orb on the table suddenly glowed. A second ago, Killer was still radiating murderous intent, but upon seeing the incoming call from Hazel, he instantly withdrew his terrifying aura. He rested his chin on both hands, his eyes turning so gentle as he looked at the orb, making the subordinate beside him shudder at the transition. Hazel's image appeared inside the orb. "Good morning, did you sleep well last night? I was so tired yesterday that I accidentally fell asleep." Killer, who was as cold as ice just moments ago, immediately began to act pitiful. "Because my wife didn't keep her promise, I stayed awake until morning. If I could hear you say you miss me, perhaps I would feel a bit better." Faced with those sudden sweet words, Heiser on the other end was speechless. She could only remind herself to temporarily keep playing along with him. Heiser complied, saying sweetly, "Actually, I miss my beloved husband very much too." Killer was extremely pleased to hear this, casually asking how the work at the guild over there was progressing. Heiser looked at the communication orb, recounting yesterday's journey and mentioning that she still had to attend a joint meeting between the guilds today. Hearing up to this point, Killer interrupted, "If you have to meet the leaders of other guilds, I have specially prepared a small gift." The door opened, and Nigella and Alice walked in, bringing in a whole line of high-end formal dresses. Killer on the other end instructed, "We can't let those guild leaders look down on you. Choose the dress you like most to wear." Nigella added that he had not only sent the dress, but had also fully prepared the matching gloves and accessories. The guild master's husband truly took wonderful care of her. In the face of her subordinate's sincere admiration, Hazel could only give a forced smile in agreement. Afterward, she thanked Killer through the communication orb, saying she would quickly finish up the work here, and affectionately reminded him to eat his meals on time. Killer held the communication orb in his hands and replied gently. He said that as long as she always kept him in her heart, he would have nothing to worry about. The call ended, and as soon as the communication orb turned off, Hazel, who had just been smiling, instantly looked as if all her energy had been drained, collapsing onto her chair. She couldn't help but sigh, feeling utterly exhausted. In truth, Hazel had not slept well at all last night. Because she was so exhausted, she only dozed off for a moment before waking up, and spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, unable to sleep. She had grown accustomed to having Killer by her side. His sudden absence left her feeling completely out of place. Hazel looked at the communication orb on the table, reminding herself to wake up quickly and not let her emotions bind her. Nigella noticed her fatigue and asked caringly, "Is the guildmaster too tired?" Hazel replied that she was fine, planning to go out for a walk while it was still early to clear her head. Alice reminded her, "The clothes and accessories for going out are ready, miss." Hazel said there was no rush to go out, then casually praised Alice for working hard so early in the morning. Alice replied with a bright smile, "As long as I can help you, I am very happy." Looking at the enthusiastic girl before her, Hazel's heart suddenly sank. Only now did she realize that, aside from knowing her name was Alice, she knew almost nothing about the maid who was always by her side caring for her. Was it because she was previously so deeply in love that her vision had become so narrow, to the point of overlooking even the people and events around her? The oversight she had just realized made Hazel alert immediately. She thought to herself that she could not continue sitting here in self-pity. Hazel decided to brush aside the distress of insomnia, tidied herself up, and walked out the door. She went straight to the temple. A polite priest stepped forward to greet her. "What brings you here today?" Hazel smiled. "Of course, it is to pray." The nature of illusion magic belongs to dark magic, making the temple, overflowing with divine power, the very place that counters Hazel. Yet today, she still grit her teeth and came here to secure an extra layer of life insurance. Hazel expressed her desire to provide regular sponsorship to the temple, then casually asked what benefits a sponsor would receive. Upon hearing that a major sponsor had come to them, the priest's attitude immediately became unusually enthusiastic. He eagerly introduced everything from private prayer services to premium blessings. Hazel was dazed by the non-stop sales pitch, while the priest impatiently urged her to sign the agreement right away. Even the payment method was meticulously arranged. Not only could she settle on a monthly basis, but it could also be linked directly to her bank account for automatic deduction. Hazel listened and couldn't help but mutter to herself that this slick process was no different from selling insurance. She quickly cut off the sales pitch and turned to ask about what truly concerned her. What kind of security guarantees could the temple provide for her? Hearing this, the priest's expression turned serious. He asked if she was being threatened by someone. Hazel didn't give a definitive answer, only admitting that she indeed had a few concerns. The priest clearly assured that during the time of being protected by the temple, those in need of refuge could move in at any time. In this place, even the emperor dared not trespass. Hearing that promise, Hazel finally got the answer she wanted. In the original story, the female lead Lily also managed to save her life this way. But Hazel did not plan to move in right away. Once receiving the protection of the temple, she would have to practice asceticism and pray every morning, with extremely harsh living conditions. For a black mage, that was no different than suffering double physical impact. Her plan was very clear. First, she had to leave successfully and live the life of an ordinary person. Later, if she really encountered danger, she would run into the temple for refuge. The priest handed Hazel a badge. Just by carrying it with her, she could immediately receive protection upon entering any temple. Hazel smiled in gratitude and carefully put away the life-saving amulet. The trip to the temple ended successfully, and before they knew it, dusk was already approaching. Hazel changed into a splendid formal attire, leading Nigella to the venue of the guild gathering. Since she had never appeared in public before, the guests whispered among themselves, curious about how coarse and fierce the renowned guild president would be. Hazel calmly led Nigella into the banquet hall. Nigella nervously looked around, overwhelmed by the powerful aura of the other guild presidents. Only now did she understand why the other secretaries refused to attend such events. Hazel, on the other hand, was completely at ease, smiling playfully. "Do I look like the weakest person here?" Nigella immediately denied it with excitement. "You are the most powerful one, President." Hazel was smiling in response when a silver-haired man holding a wineglass approached. This person was Zam, the branch president of the North. After greeting her, he politely shook Hazel's hand and asked, "Have you ever been to Surgo?" On the surface, Hazel only said she had heard of it, but she knew very well that Surgo in the north was an extremely dangerous area. Therefore, she absolutely could not choose the north as her retreat route. She had originally intended to use this gathering to gather information from various places, but she did not expect the person opposite her to mention the absolute worst location. Even so, to win over a potential ally, Heiser maintained a polite attitude. Zam also proactively promised that if she ever came to the north in the future, he would be happy to help at any time. Just then, Ted, the branch president of the South, walked over with his wife, Lena. Ted mentioned that demonic beasts had been rampant in the South recently, and they urgently needed a guild to cooperate with. Heiser realized the danger had spread to all regions. After that, Hermie from Castan also joined the conversation. He humbly said he had just taken over the guild for half a year, and still had many things to learn from everyone. Ted casually asked about the recent situation in Castan. Hermie frankly replied that the place was not attacked by demonic beasts, but because people from all over were flocking there, the work was extremely busy. Hearing about the mixed population, Heiser immediately paid silent attention. A place with frequent flow of people was the most suitable location to hide her trace, and also an ideal place to escape from killer. She quietly memorized the name Castan. At this moment, Hermie looked at Heiser, smiled and asked, "We have not heard your introduction yet. Where are you from?" Heiser calmly replied, "I am Heiser, from Ferrarium." Hearing of Ferrarium, Lena remembered that there was an extremely famous guild there, and Ted also reacted immediately. She was indeed the guild master of the On Guild. Jam, standing nearby, smiled and added that everyone had been very curious about her, as this was the first time the leader of the On Guild had personally attended the gathering. Hearing the words "first time," Heiser's heart suddenly sank. Thank you for watching the entire video. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our latest videos.